Can you imagine living without frozen pizza, potato chips, ice cream, or Tennessee whiskey? Fact is, these CPG food and beverage staples would likely not be in existence today in its current iteration if it wasn't for the innovative, inventive minds of Black Americans throughout history. Every year as I grow older and hopefully a little bit wiser, I tend to dig in further and further into American history, the American history that was not taught in our traditional school systems. Now, history is an academic subject, but the history of history, or basically taking subjective observations and turning them into objective truths, is actually rooted in marketing strategy. It's vital to remember that the world's best marketers, before they sold consumer packaged goods products, they were selling stories that eventually became truths over time. This piece of content was adapted from a previous article that I wrote for my client, One Space. And if you are interested in hearing about more prominent Black Americans that had a ton of significance to the CPG industry, I would suggest checking that article out. I will link that article in the description below in this video, and that will really serve as some further kind of educational information that hopefully will spark your interest in even learning about more interesting stories that even were not in that article. So the first individual that I want to talk about is a story that I did not know anything about before researching that article, and it's one that I think most people probably don't know anything about. And the Black American that I'm talking about is Nathan, or known as Nearest Green. And story goes, in the late 1850s, Jack Daniel, yes, that Jack Daniel that created Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey, started to work on a farm that Reverend Dan Schall owned in Tennessee. It was a 300 plus acre farm that had a ton of different people working on it, and it did also have a whiskey distillery. And it just so happened that Nearest Green was the distiller on the property. As Jack Daniel became older, he became more interested in the distillery, and Nearest Green kind of took Jack Daniel under his wing, kind of told him a bunch of different things, taught him the ways. And then after the American Civil War, Reverend Dan Schall kind of fell under some financial woes, and he sold the distillery to Jack Daniel. Jack Daniel ended up hiring Nearest Green as his first master distiller for the Jack Daniel distillery. So without Nearest Green, there wouldn't be the world's most popular whiskey, Jack Daniel's. And for whiskey fans, maybe you have recognized the brand that launched a few years ago, a premium whiskey, Tennessee whiskey brand called Uncle Nearest. And that's actually from the foundation, the Nearest Green Foundation, that did create that product based on some original recipes, and is really to help honor the lost legacy of this Tennessee whiskey legend. The second prominent Black American that had a ton of significance to the CPG industry is Frederick McKinley Jones. And he was an inventor. He had 60 plus patents. And most notably, the patent that is the most significant to the CPG industry is that he was responsible for the portable air cooling system that's attached to trucks. So in 1940, Frederick McKinley Jones co-founded the U.S. Thermo Control Company, which is now known as Thermo King. And without his foundational invention for cold chain distribution, arguably, the CPG industry would look nothing like it does today. A lot of the categories would just not exist, and supermarkets would not be as big as they are today, driving prices down for everybody. You look at just cold chain distribution, you now are able to ship perishables, frozen goods, things that need to be chilled like meats, and avoid large amounts of spoilage. Frederick McKinley Jones also was the first Black American to get the U.S. National Medal of Technology in 1991. Another significant Black American to the CPG industry is one that maybe a lot more people know about recently, and that is Madam C.J. Walker, or born as Sarah Breedlove. And that's because there was a Netflix docuseries that chronicled her life called Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. It really was an inspiring story, entrepreneurial story, just something that a lot of us didn't know until we watched that docuseries. And Madam C.J. Walker created a hair care system called Madam Walker's Wonderful Hair Grower, and this became the foundation of her business empire. She also had production facilities. She had, I think, thousands of different door-to-door sales employees. She had beauty salons, and her business ended up growing and earning her the honor of being the first female Black American to become a millionaire. And she arguably laid the groundwork for future Black American beauty and hair care entrepreneurs like Lisa Price, which was the founder of Carol's Daughter, which sold to L'Oreal. Another historically significant Black American to the CPG industry is one that created his product before there was even packaged foods. And George Crum, though not officially kind of given the title as the inventor of the potato chip, the American chef, which owned a upstate New York restaurant in 1860, which was visited by prominent American businessmen like the Vanderbilts and Jay Gould, he would give a basket of fried potato chips to every table, and it became extremely popular, and everybody kind of knew that that was the restaurant to go to have this salty snack. And like I said, it wasn't at a time when packaged foods really even was created. So you didn't think about mass producing it, you didn't think about selling it anywhere else. You really was just something that was sold and loved in this local community that everybody kind of knew about. But years after the restaurant ended up closing, William Tappendon did begin commercializing packaged potato chips and selling them to grocery stores. So George Crum really was the reason why there is this multi-billion-dollar salty snacks category. Another Black American that was significant to the CPG industry that made his impact well before there was any packaged food or beverage was James Hemings. And when Thomas Jefferson became the U.S. minister to France in 1784, he asked James Hemings to accompany him to France and be his cook. And at that time, he became the first African-American classically trained French chef. James Hemings also cooked one of the most significant meals in American history between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. And it's also said that James Hemings introduced the American public to foods like ice cream, creme brulee, macaroni and cheese, and French fries. And the last historically significant Black American that I'm going to cover in this piece of content, like I said, there are a few more that is in that One Space article, and this is Samuel T. Wilcox. And I kind of fell in love with this story as somebody that was born and raised in Ohio. I always kind of find Ohio stories pretty interesting. And Samuel T. Wilcox grocery store that was called Fancy and Staple Groceries was the pioneer in offering a ton of premium brands to mostly upscale, wealthy customers. And in 1850, which is about 30 years before Kroger would call the city of Cincinnati home, and Kroger, as many of you guys know, is the largest pure play grocery store in the United States, Samuel T. Wilcox, his store was known as the largest dealer of provisions in the city of Cincinnati. So not to say that founders of Kroger copied or anything, but I think a lot of times inspiration comes from what you see and what you grew up around. And having such a prominent grocery store and entrepreneur in your backyard is probably something that became very inspirational for them. I hope you guys enjoyed this piece of content. I know it's a lot different than maybe the rest of my catalog, but those that consume my content regularly know I love to kind of bring things back to history, kind of draw inspiration from kind of where things came from, because I've found the more that I learn history, the more that it helps me anticipate the future. Just remember that few strategies or methods today are completely new. Most of them are recycled from decades or generations past. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help support me, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button on this video. If this is the first time you've been introduced to my videos, would love for you guys to be a part of my community by subscribing to my channel. I upload several videos just like this weekly. And if you guys want to connect further outside of this platform, I do include all of my social media links down below. I just want to thank you guys again for your time. Hopefully I gave you some value in return, and we'll see you guys on the next video.